Earlier this year, the White House said a semiconductor shortage could cause historic damage to the U.S., undercut technological competitiveness, and give our adversaries a military advantage. Since then, the $52 billion CHIPS Act passed to ramp up semiconductor production in the U.S. The Government Accountability Office just released a preliminary report on the issue. Candice Wright is a director at the GAO. Candice, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Currently, where is the U.S. in semiconductor production in the world market?
So the U.S. actually, their share of the domestic manufacturing decreased from 37% from the 1990s to now 12% in 2022. Companies that once produced semiconductors in the U.S. Either closed operations or moved facilities overseas for a number of different reasons, perhaps including things like less costly manufacturing overseas, as well as access to cheaper labor.
So the global shortage began in 2020. Why is the semiconductor supply chain so fragile?
So I think there's been a sort of a bubbling effect, if you will, over the past few decades, and the pandemic certainly just exacerbated that issue and really amplified the weaknesses in the supply chain. There are a couple of things. One, the fact that there are a small concentration of suppliers who operate in the space, which can create certainly single points of failure. In addition to that, you also had issues with manufacturing facilities being geographically dispersed. We don't have, the domestic capacity here in the U.S., and so that requires reliance on foreign suppliers overseas. In addition to that, I'll also just note that there were manufacturing shutdowns during the pandemic, which certainly created problems for getting access to semiconductors for a number of different industries.
So for your report, you spoke to 17 different experts, and all of them agreed that workforce development is needed. What does that actually mean?
So this, it was really interesting to see that they unanimously agreed on this particular policy area. And really what that stems from is the fact that we just don't have the workforce that we used to, again, because there isn't that same domestic manufacturing that existed several decades ago. And so as a result, we've had a brain drain. And so what the experts reported here, they shared insights that it would really be important to make sure that we're focusing on workforce development. This could include things like investing in STEM training. It could also include providing scholarships and really providing opportunities and promoting career opportunities, I should say, to make people aware of the potential for careers in the field and to bring in new people, bringing aspiring students and workers who might otherwise go to high-tech industries, to make them aware that there are these opportunities available in manufacturing as well as R&D in the semiconductor industry.
And what about changes to immigration policy?
So that's an area where we heard differing views from the experts. There were some who certainly thought it's really important to make sure that we're building up the domestic capacity here. But then other experts pointed to the need for immigration reform, particularly to be able to keep the best and brightest of students, for example, PhD students who may come to the U.S. and want to stay, but don't really find a viable avenue to do so. And so there are some experts who thought perhaps trying to do things in tandem, focusing on the immigration reform while also building up the domestic workforce, could be a way to try to address the issue.
And obviously, semiconductor supply is critical to national defense. But the experts you talked to didn't all agree that increasing domestic manufacturing capacity was necessary. Why not?
So there are a couple of different reasons. One being certainly, does the U.S. even have the workforce if it were to invest in domestic manufacturing? Do they have the workforce? Again, given that there hasn't been the level of domestic manufacturing capacity stateside. In addition to that, I think there are also concerns about, do you want to have a concentration of, your facilities, your suppliers, all here in the U.S.? Is geographic dispersion across the globe a helpful way to ensure that there is to increase your resilience, I should say, in the supply chain?
And how quickly can domestic manufacturing come online and impact the global supply?
So that's an interesting question. I think we've heard a variety of different viewpoints on that. Certainly, it's not something that can be done overnight to stand up such a capacity. But again, failure to, not take action obviously will continue to exacerbate the problem. And so there are a couple of different priorities that really need to be considered. Is whether or not the priority is national security, whether it's economic competitiveness, or again making sure that we can increase and strengthen the resilience. And so depending on which priority the federal government wants to focus on, then that should inform the appropriate policy option.
And finally, Candice, multiple federal agencies deal with semiconductor activities. How are agencies collaborating? How should they be collaborating?
Yeah, so certainly we see that there are a number of agencies who have various efforts and activities and authorization, I should say, to have programs and initiatives in place to address the issue. A key thing is really making sure that there is a clear understanding, a common understanding of what the goals are for federal semiconductor policies, and then taking the necessary steps to see what are each of the agencies doing independently, and identifying where there might be intersections in their policies and programs, but then also looking to make sure that we understand where the gaps are and what can be done to close those gaps.
All right, Candice, we appreciate you being on the program. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any future Government Matters interviews.